that misunderstanding is based on lack of education. Because whatever we hear through the media or publicity, whatever agenda is behind those publicities, we just grasp those things as reality. I'm not saying that are bad or good or whatever. People are people. It is not a religion, it is people. One. And second is that no nation is innocent from destruction. So we have to understand that. If it happens to New York City, it also happens in Afghanistan, it happens in Iraq, it happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it happens everywhere. It is not religion, it is people. But then at the same time, since we do not want to look at ourselves, we blame religions. Somewhere along the line, we have to separate religion from political systems. I'm sure that those teachers of religions have no problem getting together and talk, but it is the followers who have problems. One. Second is that we always take the teachings and change them and revise them and re-edit them according to our own likings. That has to stop. And that is not in one religion, it is in every religion. Because ultimately human being wants to have that power of authority, so we take whatever is there, we edit it, and we feed people. And the people who sometimes are not educated, they will take that as a real thing.
I was appalled that Muslim women were being harassed in our community. Women that covered were being driven off the road when they were driving. They were afraid to go out. They were afraid to send their children to school. The imam was being threatened. Bombings of the mosque were being threatened. We stood around the mosque in solidarity. But I was especially worried about women because women are vulnerable. And I wanted to do something, and I was ignorant about Islam, and I didn't know what to do. So I called our local imam and said, I'm ignorant and I want to help, and I don't know how to help. And he put me in touch with a Muslim woman, and we connected immediately. And she is the other co-founder of Women Transcending Boundaries, and she's a very brave woman. It was a true act of courage for her to step out of her safe space and talk to a woman she had never laid eyes on, and open herself completely and say, this is how the women in our community feel. And it was clear that we had been living in a bubble, and I couldn't go back there again. I needed to do something to make a difference. The level of ignorance and violence and hatred in our community astounded me, and I didn't want to be part of it. I wanted to transcend that, if you will, and that's how we came to the name Women Transcending Boundaries. I'm a speech language pathologist, and all of us at the hospital, we were working in an outpatient facility, and all our beepers went off because we heard about 9/11, and we were called back to the hospital, and we were doing triage and waiting for the overflow from New York City. And we kept hearing about Pentagon, we kept hearing about Pennsylvania. They were saying that Sears Tower is being threatened. So we were standing on one foot all day, waiting to do something, waiting to help, and no one came. I remember standing around in a park that evening at a candlelight vigil, standing in the dark, saying, what can we do? What happened? I don't understand. And the following week at church, at an adult forum, we didn't talk about the topic. Everyone was talking about 9/11, and a woman described shopping in a mall and seeing Muslim women who covered, and they were anxious, visibly anxious, and she wanted to go up to them and say something to them, but she didn't want to frighten them. And she didn't know what to say, and she said, the moment passed, and I still don't know what to say. And that was just like zonked to my heart. That's exactly how I feel. And I drove my husband crazy, saying, I have to do something, I have to do something. And he was the executive director of the Interfaith Council of Central New York, and he said, call Imam Qubaisi, I don't know what to do. So I called him, and he knew me, and he said there was a woman, Danya Willman, that might talk to me. He would call her, and if she wanted to call me, she would. And she had the bravery to do that, and the amazing patience to start letting me see how truly ignorant I was. We talked for hours on the phone, and I said, would you come over for coffee? And she did. And I remember her driving up to our house and sitting in her car, and she covered completely. She wore the veil. And she just sat there. And I walked out of the house and extended my hand, and I said, please come in. And she took my hand. So nothing would have happened had she not taken my hand. She had the courage to step out of her comfort zone. And we talked for hours, and I realized I knew other women that would enjoy the conversation. And she knew Sunni women at the mosque that would like to know that women in the community were concerned and cared. So I invited 9 women, Buddhist, Ismaili, Jewish, and Christian, and she invited 9 Sunni women. 2 weeks later, I had 20 women in my living room, and they were students, they were nursing mothers, they were grandparents, retired women, doctors, lawyers, housewives. Everybody brought food, but we were all talking about the same thing. How do we help our community? What do we do? How can we do something positive in the wake of 9/11? And 2 weeks later, I had 40 women in my living room. I mean, I did nothing except provide the space. And the women provided the energy, and we saw very quickly that we had more in common than our differences. We're women. Many of us were mothers. We care about the poor. We take care of our families. We educate our young. The same tenets in every religion are there. And we realized that we needed to educate ourselves, which we did.
So much of what I'm doing is trying to support members of the United Church across the country in knowing their neighbors and their neighbor who is of different faith or different tradition, and how do we learn to understand each other, how do we learn to work together, how do we work together for the mending of the world. Priority is for justice and compassion in the world, and that we will work together with people of all faiths and people of goodwill, whether they be of faith or not, who are willing to work for the world's mending, who are willing to do the work of justice. Some of that is the traditional dialogue and building relationships, because we need to do that in order to be able to work towards the world's mending. But some of it is finding those places where we can work on creating together transformation. A big piece of our work has to be building those relationships, out of which community grows, out of which alliances grow that can change. But I guess for me more and more, it's also learning to engage with difference. And so, yes, respect, yes, accept, but also to name our differences and the way they are manifest in differences in power, to figure out how we might work towards a different way of, is the thing I read this afternoon, doing differently. How we can work towards a place where we can celebrate and live with diversity in ways where our differences don't necessarily mean inequalities of power.
In the interfaith work, it's just like tremendous women, powerhouse women, and not just powerhouse like, oh, I'm going to dominate every incredible women. It almost makes me speechless to think about the women that I've met and been able to be around and to meet and to know. And the heart, there's always this like really, this heart energy and this openness.
She refers not to the woman, but she refers to it as the spiritual ideal. The spiritual ideal. And so it would represent that which is highest in everyone. And it's a radical departure, really, because we've always used as the highest ideal, myself as a Christian, would be Jesus. But she says the spiritual ideal represented first by Jesus and second by woman.
And so we, although as I say, we acknowledge that different parts are different ways to the same divine presence, we stress that people should take one path and follow it, and under skill guidance that they should follow it. Not too enthusiastic about too much eclecticism or eclectic religion. Although we do believe, I do believe that one can learn from other faiths and one can get one's own practices reinforced and perhaps helped by other faiths, but then you take it back into your own tradition and use it for your spiritual practice.
Right.
It's very important in any era or in any place or in any time that the great spiritual heritage of India is the ideal that our true nature, our true sense of identity is not I'm a woman or I'm a Hindu or I'm American or I'm Indian. Our true sense of identity is our relationship with God. And to live in experiential awareness of that relationship and to manifest that relationship within our whole environment, this is the purpose of life. And if we pursue this, if we try for this, that not only will our own lives be a life of joy and blessing, but they will be a blessing to our families and to our community and to everyone that we come into. That cultivating our spiritual life is watering the root.
Right.
And if we water the root of everything, then everything else will take on a different perspective. And it's not that we won't have life's problems, but we will have a great resource inside of ourselves that we can access during those times of problems.
Women are the driving force, and I do think we're at a time in history, we're at a thin place where the sacred is reaching. Women are poised for their voices to be heard, and it's about time.